Imagine this. A cold wind sweeps the steppes, and over the horizon thunders a host of horsemen, silent, swift, and deadly. Their enemies call them demons, kings fear them, and their name is spoken like a curse, the Cimmerians. This is a new episode in our historical journey, so if you enjoy epic tales from the edge of history, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stay with us. They came from the mists of the north, stormed the kingdoms of the Iron Age, and vanished without leaving behind a single written word. And yet, thousands of years later, that name would inspire one of the most iconic characters in modern fantasy, Conan the Barbarian. But who were they, really? Behind the myth is a raw, fascinating truth. To find the real Cimmerians, we must go back to the 8th century BCE, to the vast grasslands north of the Black Sea, what is now southern Russia and Ukraine. This was the Pontic-Caspian steppe, the cradle of countless nomadic civilizations. The Cimmerians didn't write history, but history remembered them. They appear in Akkadian records from the Neo-Assyrian Empire as Cimmeria. Herodotus speaks of them with awe. Even the Old Testament may echo their legacy through the descendants of Gomer. To the Greeks, they were creatures of mist and darkness, living at the edges of the world. A poetic exaggeration? Perhaps. But archaeologists have since found they were very real and very dangerous. Excavations across the steppe have uncovered the kurgans, burial mounds, of what scholars now link to the Cimmerian people. Inside, bronze weapons, arrowheads, horse gear, and traces of battle scars on bones. These were no primitive raiders. They were early adopters of mounted warfare, likely among the first in history to master the art of horse archery. This military innovation, speed and range, gave them immense power. Their graves suggest a society geared entirely for mobility and combat. Some women were even buried with weapons, possibly inspiring the legends of the Amazons. We still don't know exactly who the Cimmerians were ethnically. Many scholars believe they were an Iranic-speaking people, like their later rivals the Scythians. Others suggest Thracian or even Anatolian links. But one thing is certain, they were not farmers or kings. They were a confederation of tribes, warriors whose wealth was in their horses and cattle, whose loyalty lay with their clan. Climate change in the early Iron Age forced many to abandon agriculture. The Cimmerians adapted brilliantly, becoming a mobile storm over a sedentary world. Around 714 BCE, the Cimmerians were driven south by the rising power of the Scythians. They crossed the Caucasus Mountains into the kingdom of Urartu, devastating its forces. King Reinventing of Urartu suffered a humiliating defeat. Soon after, the Assyrians began referring to parts of northwestern Iran as Mat Gamir, the land of the Cimmerians. Now the Cimmerians were no longer lurking in the shadows. They were a force of nature, ripping through the map of the ancient world. The next to fall was Phrygia in modern-day Turkey. Around 696 BCE, the Cimmerians swept into the region. Their target, Gordium, capital of the wealthy kingdom, ruled by King Midas. Yes, that Midas. He begged the Assyrians for help, but it wasn't enough. The Cimmerians destroyed the city. According to Strabo, King Midas took his own life by drinking bull's blood rather than face defeat. And remarkably, archaeology supports this. Excavations at Gordium show a destruction layer dated precisely to this time. With Phrygia in ruins, the Cimmerians turned Anatolia into their playground. For decades, they raided with impunity, striking fear into Greek coastal colonies and dominating regional politics. Their crowning victory came in 652 BCE. They stormed Sardis, the capital of Lydia, and killed King Gyges in battle. His wealth was legendary, but even that could not save him. The Cimmerians had now crushed two kings whose names would echo for millennia. But despite their victories, the Cimmerians never built a kingdom. No monuments, no cities, no walls. They were conquerors, not settlers. Their society didn't need stone. It ran on speed and steel. Mounted archers, cavalry units, and lightning raids kept their enemies off balance. And yet, that same mobility made them vulnerable, because once their enemies adapted, their tactics lost their edge. Around 637 BCE, the Lydians, under a new king, Aliats, struck back. This time, the Cimmerians were unprepared. They suffered a crushing defeat, one that broke their confederation. We hear little of them afterward. They don't vanish in battle, but dissolve into history. Some settled in Cappadocia, where the Assyrians still called the region Gamir. Slowly, they were absorbed into Anatolian life. The thunder of hooves faded into whispers. Modern archaeology continues to trace their journey. In central Anatolia, artifacts appear with steppe-style designs, evidence that Cimmerians didn't disappear, but melted into new cultures. They left no language, no scripture, but the Kurgans still speak. And in their silence, we find the mystery that would later inspire legends. Enter Robert E. Howard, Texas, 1932. A stormy day inspired him to write a moody poem titled Cimmeria. It described a grim land of hills and shadows, melancholy and powerful. That poem birthed one of fantasy's greatest icons, Conan the Cimmerian. But Howard's Cimmerians had little in common with the real warriors of the Iron Age. So how did the connection happen? Howard knew history, he read Herodotus, knew the Assyrians' terror. The name Cimmerian carried weight, dark, primal, elemental, perfect for a warrior hero. But instead of the steppes, he imagined a northern brooding land, inspired by the Scottish Highlands and Irish myths. His Cimmerians were Highland warriors with broadswords, not mounted archers. Howard was of Irish descent, and it shows. His Cimmerians live in tribal honor codes. They scorn cities and priests. They worship Crom, a god who gives strength but no mercy. They echo the Celts, free, fierce, fatalistic. Even Conan's name is Irish. Conan was a common Gaelic name, tied to old legends of warriors and giants. In Howard's Hyborian age, the Cimmerians descend from the survivors of Atlantis. Over generations, they become savages, then noble warriors, an imagined cycle of rise and fall. Eventually, they evolve into the ancestors of the Gaels, bringing the fantasy full circle back to real history. It's a beautiful synthesis. Howard takes whispers from archaeology, myths from Ireland, and rainstorms in Texas, and creates an entirely new people. And yet, something of the real Cimmerians survives in Conan, not in geography or language, but in spirit. A people who refused to be tamed, who defined themselves by the strength of their will and the edge of their blades. Back in the real world, the Kurgans still offer secrets. Female warrior burials challenge assumptions. Animal-style artwork connects them to later nomadic cultures like the Scythians and Sarmatians. They were part of a great chain of steppe civilizations, ancestors of Mongols, Turks, Huns, and yet they remain uniquely elusive. Conan became a cultural template. Books, comics, movies, his world influenced everything from Game of Thrones to The Witcher. But few realize he's built on an obscure people who once terrorized Anatolia. The Cimmerians may have vanished, but in pop culture, they live louder than ever. There are two Cimmerias, one real, one imagined. The real one raided cities, toppled kings, then vanished. The fictional one gave us a sword-wielding anti-hero who fights demons and kings with equal fury. But both are born from the same truth, that in the absence of records, stories will always rise. If this tale intrigues you, check out Adrian Mayer's The Amazons or Barry Cunliffe's The Scythian Empire. Want more Conan? Start with Robert E. Howard's original short stories like The Tower of the Elephant or Frank Frazetta's iconic Conan art. They all reflect the fusion of archaeology and imagination. The Cimmerians didn't just disappear. They evolved into memory, into legend, and into myth. And if you love discovering these lost connections between real history and epic fantasy, Subscribe now. We have many more forgotten peoples, ancient battles, and mythic echoes to explore. Until next time, ride fast, read deep, and never stop searching.